Good morning, everybody. It is Steve with Real Progressives. Questions that demand answers, my friends. Questions that demand answers. Have you noticed that unless something is directly impacting you, not just you, but probably most people, it doesn't get them moving. It doesn't get them out of their seat. They don't take it seriously. They don't stick with it. Get a couple days out of them, and then all of a sudden they fade away. Maybe you stick with the program, a couple times, and then off to something else. I'm going to ask you a question, and I think this question is a series of questions, is worth asking, right? How many people that are involuntarily unemployed are you willing to accept? Now, I'm not saying how many unemployed people. I'm asking you point blank. How many involuntarily unemployed people are you okay with? The government has the capability of making sure there are no more unemployed people at all. It really does. It has the ability to buy up all the available labor and provide it a job guarantee right now. How much involuntary unemployment, how much involuntary suffering are you willing to accept for your fellow men and women of this country? Ask yourself that, because if you're not actively fighting for a job guarantee, you are actively allowing them to keep people intentionally unemployed. Look up NAIRU, N-A-I-R-U. Now let me ask you this. How many sick people are you willing to allow to die without proper medical care? How many people is enough people to die from not having health care? I'm not talking about insurance. Let's be real clear here. How many people are you willing to allow to die without us fighting for a national health service? Think about that. When you're sitting there in your quiet time, watching some silly sitcom, you're talking about Donald Trump's comb over, going to a protest about his tax returns. Ask yourself, how many people are you willing to allow to die without health care? The next thing, how many children are you willing to allow to go from the public school to the prison pipeline because of a drug war and funding for a drug war and not funding nutrition and not funding job programs for their parents and ending generational poverty? How many children are you willing to allow to go through the public school to prison pipeline? Ask yourself that. In your private time, ask yourself how many you're okay with. How many diseases that we could solve today with government money, government investment in research and development, how many of those diseases are you willing to allow people to suffer and die from before you take action and push the government to spend? How many of those deaths are an acceptable level to you? How many people are you willing to allow to die unnecessarily? Just ask yourself this in your private time, in your quiet space, when you're on the train going to work, when you're laying in bed trying to go to sleep at night. Ask yourself. Ask yourself how many people that die early in life, way premature. How many premature deaths from a lack of services is enough for you? Are you willing to accept? How much are you willing to accept? How many kids are you willing to allow to carry massive double and triple digit six-figure debt from college before you fight to make college free and to end student debt? How many people are you willing to allow to carry that kind of weight? Just ask. Think about it. How many is an acceptable number of people suffering from that? Now, when you hear 45,000 people a year commit suicide from unemployment alone, how many suicides from unemployment are you willing to accept? How many is an acceptable number to you before you'll fight to ensure that returning veterans have health service, that they have a job to return to, that they have a place in society, and they aren't hooked on opioids? How many of you are willing to fight for that? What is an acceptable level of PTSD in this country that's left untreated? How many people are you willing to allow to be homeless? How many is an acceptable number to you? Ultimately, if you don't put it in terms that are real, that are actual, right there in front of your face, people, your neighbors, your parents, how many are you willing to sacrifice so that you don't have to step out and learn economics? How many of them are you willing to allow to suffer because you just don't have an interest in it? How many people are you willing to allow to die from climate disasters because you aren't willing to fight for fossil fuels going down the toilet and green energy going up? How many of you are willing to allow Florida to become uninhabitable? How many of you all are willing to allow climate disaster to wipe out different species? I mean, seriously, think about it. I'm not here to give you that answer, because to me, 0 is the answer. 0 is the answer. I'm not willing to have any unnecessary death. I'm not willing to have unnecessary climate disasters. I'm not willing to suffer through kids hanging themselves because they don't think that there's a job waiting for them and because they're carrying student debt. 0. 0 is my answer. But I think that there are people out there so lazy, so unwilling to learn, that without realizing the cause and effect of them checking out and refusing to help fight for economic justice, that they need to see that their lethargy is a death sentence for somebody else. And that's privilege right there. That's gambling with someone else's life because you don't much see the point in bothering to learn. Now, as a person who's made it my calling, and it's cost me my career, it's cost me so many things, fighting for economic justice, I'm asking you all to look within and say, what are you willing to do to help ensure that this country stops going to war for oil because we've invested in green energy? I'm asking you to wonder and to question your own motives for ignoring the almighty question, how are you going to pay for it? Because that question alone prevents the entirety of the policy space that we need to fix these problems to ever be enacted. How much suffering are you willing to co-sign so that you don't have to learn? Think about that. I'm Steve Grumbine with Real Progressives, hoping you learn about modern monetary theory and how federal financing works and how it can solve most of the problems that we face as a society and as a movement. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.